Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1497B, and today's date is February 13th, 2018, and the title of the episode is Everything is Not What It Seems, It's All Happening Behind the Scenes. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, as we know, they've been pushing the Russian hacking stories since 2016. During the election, saying that they hacked the election, this is why Clinton lost, blah, 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 blah. And at every turn, they've been proven wrong, that Russia really didn't hack the elections. And if you really look at the evidence that Russia hacked the elections, there was none. They couldn't come up with anything. And we can see that CNN, not once but twice, admitted that they pushed fake Russian news with no proof for ratings. CNN, in their magnificent fall from the fake news pedestal, the New York Times quietly admitted their bombshell backbone to the entire Russian narrative was simply not true. Now, the Department of Homeland Security has even stepped in to lay the rumors to rest put out by NBC last week, claiming that Russia successfully penetrated the voting system in several states. Now, according to NBC, in an exclusive report, they received information from Janet Manfra, the head of cybersecurity at the Department of Homeland Security, who said she couldn't talk about classified information publicly, but in 2016, we saw a targeted of 21 states, and an exceptionally small number of them were actually successfully penetrated. However, this week, Manfra came forward to call NBC out for spinning her words to make it seem like the U.S. had been hacked. Now, Janet Manfra said that the recent NBC reporting has misrepresented facts and confused the public with regard to Department of Homeland Security and state and local government efforts to combat election hacking. Despite the fact that Manfra said an exceptionally small number of states were targeted successfully, NBC's headline on its website read, "Russians penetrated U.S. voter systems, top U.S. official says." Now, last year, WikiLeaks detailed the contents of the book Shattered, written by Jonathan Allen, which lays out the plan quite clearly. WikiLeaks uploaded a picture from a page of Allen's new book, which destroys the Russian hacking narrative immediately. And we know that this was completely fake, phony, and false. And the corporate media, the intelligence agencies, they kept pushing the idea that this was true, and it's all turning on them right now. Even Snopes and all the rest of the fact checkers came out and said, yes, Russia did hack the elections. Now, if you look at Snopes, and other fact checkers, one of the headlines was, Russia hackers had targets worldwide beyond U.S. election. And they went on to say how it was done, how it was, performed. And of course, they do a counter argument about how, Trump says it didn't happen. And there are many different articles. But the headline says, and it makes it, when you see it, and this is, most of the people don't read past this, it makes it seem like that Russia did hack the elections. Now, we know that this is completely fake, phony, and false, because now we have different organizations coming out saying that, yeah, this never happened. It didn't happen. And again, they were telling us that, Russia was hacking the French elections. And again, that came out to be false. So once again, we can see that they push the agenda that they need to push. And later on, we can see that the truth does come out. And we can see that the corporate media is still spinning it to make it seem like that Russia's still hacking. We see Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley uncovered an unusual email from former NatSec advisor to Barack Obama. Susan Wright sent herself on January 20th, 2017, Trump's inauguration day. She sent herself an email. And it looks like Ambassador Rice appears to have used this email to document a January 5th, 2017 Oval Office meeting between President Obama, former FBI Director James Comey, and former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates regarding Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. In particular, Ambassador Rice wrote, President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement communities by the book. The president stressed that he is not asking about, initiating, or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as it normally would by the book. Now, Grassley is saying this is very odd, that among her activities in the final moments of the final day of the Obama administration, you would feel the need to send yourself such an unusual email purporting to document a conversation involving the president and his interactions with the FBI regarding the Trump-Russia investigation. In addition, despite your claim that President Obama repeatedly told Mr. Comey to proceed by the book, substantial questions have arisen about whether officials at the FBI, as well as the Justice Department and the State Department, actually did proceed by the book. And I have to say, this is a very strange email to write to yourself. And the only reason I can see why you would write something like this and specifically say, let's do this by the book, and we need to find out what really went on here, is to make sure you had something in there to cover your tracks. Now, again, this attempt to cover Obama's back and the rest of the people, it may backfire on them, which I think is happening right now. And this is something very, very odd, because you would then have like Obama telling, the FBI and all this with an email sent to the FBI, let's investigate this, let's see what really happened, and before we announce it, let's have the proof. But they didn't even do that. They just came out right off the bat as soon as Clinton lost that Russia hacked everything, and that's why she lost. Now, we can see at this point that they're trying to cover up, and they were putting these things in there because they realized that if they started to probe, they would have to find this email, and this would exonerate them, saying, no, we did everything by the book. And I think this is why Mueller was in there. He was cleaning up a lot of the stuff in the FBI. This is why they were saying they didn't want Trump administration, all the people coming in to touch their stuff. They were afraid that he was going to destroy it. No, really what they were saying is they were hiding and destroying everything that they have done in the past. Now we see that the Pentagon is sending heavily armored Marine units to East Asia to counter the China threat. A group of about 2,200 Marines. This is a Marine Expeditionary Unit, MEU, pronounced MEU, and they're heading to China. Now, all they're doing right now is sending this stuff out there, and it's rotating with the troops that are already out there. Now, the corporate media is out there. The Wall Street Journal is saying that, this is to counter China. Really, 2,200 troops is going to counter China by sending a rotational force into the area. It makes no sense whatsoever. What they're really doing right now is they're trying to build this up. Actually, the MEUs deploy in a 7-month rotation on the Tara-class ambitious assault ships operated by the United States Navy. They may stay offshore for the entire time of deployment or come ashore for small periods of time to conduct training exercises. And we see right now that the corporate media is out there to push the idea that something is about to happen, that we're going to war, and everything that we're seeing is not what it seems. Peace, discussions with Russia and China, this is all happening behind the scenes. We have two things happening right now. We have the deep state, the neocons, out in front with the corporate media, which is their mouthpiece, pushing their agenda still. Talking about war, talking about how we're going to be going into Syria, how we're going to be going to North Korea, how we're going to be invading any minute. Then on the other side, we have what's really going on, where Russia and China and the U.S. are working on deals to calm the situation down in North Korea, where they implemented the double freeze plan, where now they're ready to speak to each other to talk about peace. In Syria, certain parts of the armed forces are actually going after the Islamic State. We still have the cabal, the deep state, the paid mercenaries in the Kurdish area, and we have two things happening there all at once. So what we're seeing is that the U.S. is actually working with Russia in Syria right now. We have a problem with the deep state, with the cabal, which they can't control right now, because as we can see, there's still factions within government that the Trump administration cannot control. They can't really control the corporate media. They're just going to go off and do whatever they want and listen to the intelligence community. But we can see that there are two things happening at once. And because you hear these things, because they tell you that North Korea is going to be firing a missile at the United States, because they tell you that we're going to be invading, doesn't mean it's really happening. That's what they want you to believe. That's what they want you to think is happening. And of course, if one corporate media station says it, and then another one says it, remember they're all interconnected, and another one says it, you have to believe it because multiple sources say it's true. And this is what they've done for a very long time. But what we can see is really happening is not what they say is happening. Because they told us we're going to be bringing in troops into Syria right after the missile launch into the airbase. Never happened. They said we're going to be attacking and in war with North Korea maybe by fall of 2017. Didn't happen. There is no plan to go in and invade North Korea. Yes, they might have written plans saying that we're going to use these, but there was no actual plan to say we're going in there. The plan was to try to calm the situation down. The plan was to have peace. The plan was to implement the double freeze plan that China and Russia put forth. So Trump can speak to the leader of North Korea. That was the real plan. Everything the corporate media is telling you and all this stuff about war, that was never the plan. We see Israel, well, Netanyahu has a bit of a problem. After a 14-month-long investigation, Israeli police have reportedly recommended that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu be indicted on charges of bribery and breach of trust. And I believe this is why he's pushing the war in Syria, actually not with Syria, but probably with Iran in Syria to get something going right now. And this is coming out of the Jerusalem Post. In Case 1000, the gifts affair, it is alleged that Netanyahu improperly accepted expensive gifts from different businessmen. And at this stage, the prosecution and attorney general will examine the evidence that the police collect throughout the investigation and will later decide whether to actually indict the prime minister or not. Now, Netanyahu is not required at this point to resign from office. The law says that only after a preemptory Supreme Court verdict, the prime minister must resign from office. And right now, Netanyahu's office is not responding. His wife is also in trouble with other issues. And we can see that thousands of Israelis they've taken to the streets in recent weekends, rallying against the government corruption and calling Netanyahu to step down. And I do believe this is why he most likely is trying to get something going to distract from all of this and maybe put this on the back burner if a war is started. We see that Bloomberg and other corporate media news outlets are reporting that 200 Russian mercenaries reportedly killed by U.S. airstrikes in Syria. Again, this had nothing to do with Russia. These are paid mercenaries, most likely set up by the CIA, and they're reporting that, we shot down Russian soldiers. That's how they started it, and then they turned it into Russian mercenaries. And we can see right now that they're pushing this agenda to get something started in Syria. And it's not clear who's paying the Russian contingent. Most likely, I'm going to say it's the CIA, but it could be anyone. It could be any type of intelligence agency. We know they hire paid mercenaries to do this type of stuff. And we need to remember something very important. The U.S. and Russia, the armed forces, are talking to each other. They have an open channel, and they understand and they know where each one of the troops are. They know what they're doing, and they're always in contact. And once again, there is no way that the Russian soldiers would mount some type of an attack and the U.S. would just come in and fire at the Russian soldiers. Well, these are really paid mercenaries, but they try to convince us that it was Russian soldiers, and they're trying to convince us that these Russian paid mercenaries are the armed forces of Russia, which they use in Syria. And once again, this is not how Russia works. This is not how they do things. This is not how they've been doing things. And we can see that there are different intelligence agencies that actually operate in this fashion. And we see already that Russia is out there. The Russian Center for Reconciliation of Opposing Sides in Syria says it has received a phone call warning about a possible chemical weapons attack in the northwestern Syrian province of Idlib by militants and the White Helmets. And the phone call warned that these militants, formerly known as Al-Nusra Front, together with the White Helmets, well, they're hatching a plot on the Idlib chemical attack, and they're getting ready to do something. Now, what did they see? Well, according to their information, they've seen 20 containers with chlorine arrive at the village of Idlib, and it looks like they're preparing to stage a false flag. Remember, Mattis came out, the French defense minister came out, and they all said there is no proof whatsoever that Assad is using chemical weapons. So how do you prove this to the world? You stage a propaganda stunt. Now, since Mattis and the French defense minister said there's no proof, the intelligence operatives said, okay, here we go. We're going to stage something, and we're going to say it's from Assad. He's the one who did this. Here is your proof, because we already have Emmanuel Macron out there saying, listen, we don't have any proof, or we haven't found any proof of chemical weapons used in Syria by Assad, but if we do have proof, and we do have the evidence that that emerges, we will strike Syria. We will go in there and we will bomb. So the intelligence agencies, they are setting this up. They're getting prepared and ready to push their agenda because they want France to come in. They want the narrative to change that Assad used chemical weapons. And we can see that already Russia is putting out the word to expect a false flag event where the White Helmets, the terrorists, are using chlorine. Now, what's very interesting about all of this is that the terrorists, they have the containers of chlorine. How many times do we have to go through this where the terrorists are found with sarin gas? The Islamic State, they had a factory of sarin gas. They had sarin gas containers. We had the Al-Nusra and the rest of the moderate rebels. They had chlorine gas. I mean, we keep finding these chemical weapons on the terrorist, and I'm going to put quotes around this, the terrorist group, but it has to be Assad. I mean, it doesn't even make sense anymore. Actually, right now, they have confirmed that the Islamic State, right now, they're rebranding themselves as the Democratic Forces. They have proof of this. They've seen it happen, and they're seeing it happen in Deir ez-Zor, where the Islamic State is saying we're no longer the Islamic State, we are now the Syrian Democratic Forces. And they're being retrained to work with the Syrian Democratic Forces. And I've said all along, all these different factions, the Islamic State, Al-Nusra, Al-Shabaab, the moderate rebels, the Syrian Democratic Force, all these things, they're all one and the same. They're all paid mercenaries, created, trained, supported by the neocons, McCain, CIA, intelligence, and the rest. They're all one and the same to push their agenda. And we can see right now the U.S. and Russia, they're discussing steps that should be taken in order to achieve peace in Syria. And they're in discussions right now because what's happening behind the scenes is everything the corporate media doesn't want you to know. They just want you to know there's war, Russia might retaliate. What are they going to do next? Russia's not going to do anything next because it wasn't Russia. They're pushing this agenda to convince everyone, to convince Congress. They play on this to push their agenda. But what's happening in the background with Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, and the Moon Jae-in and all these other individuals, everything else is happening behind the scenes, and they're countering everything the deep state has been doing. Now, we know the Olympics are happening, and we know that there was some type of cyber attack that occurred during the games on the opening ceremony. And they've dubbed this malware the Olympic Destroyer. And they're not pinning it on anyone as of yet, but they're saying that their main mission was to basically shut down the power in the entire stadium. This is what they're saying from what they've seen so far. Now remember, from Vault 7 and everything else, the CIA has the ability to make it look like these cyber attacks are coming from a certain country. They have the ability to mimic this. But what's very interesting is that Coates is out there, and he is saying that North Korea, Russia, they might be ready to have some type of cyber attack on the U.S. So let's break this down. He says, we expect the heavily sanctioned North Korea to use cyber operations to raise funds and go gather intelligence or launch attacks on South Korea and the United States. Coates warned in a statement for the record titled Worldwide Threat Assessment of the U.S. Intelligence Community. His strategic calculus, Kim Jong-un, is not changing, and we should not be misled by the events that are taking place around the Olympics, where we see peace, where we see Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un coming together, where we see Kim Jong-un allowing Moon Jae-in to come up to North Korea to have peace talks. He's saying we shouldn't pay attention to that. The U.S. intelligence report released on Tuesday, remember this is coming from the intelligence agencies, has accused 3 states, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, of preparing aggressive cyber attacks against the U.S. and allies. We talked about a main event. We talked about how the deep state, they will have no option but to make people believe we are under attack, because under NATO and under the U.S., if we are cyber attacked, that is an act of war. And I do believe that they will push their agenda to make everyone believe that we were cyber attacked by one of these countries, to try to get us into war, because this is all they have left. They need it for a distraction. They need it to make everyone believe that this is actually happening. They will hit the power infrastructure. They will hit the financial institutions. They might even hit the computer systems in the NSA. They might even hit the systems in the Pentagon to destroy as many records as they possibly can. So this way, they have no information on what really happened. And we can see that this was done during 9/11, when the $2 trillion was missing from the Pentagon. Certain parts of the Pentagon, certain areas, well, everything just disappeared by bombs and explosion and fire. And the same thing is most likely going to happen once again, because the deep state, they're not finished as of yet. Yes, they're beaten down, but we can see right now they're going to be pushing their agenda. Their agenda is to distract from all of this, to get us into war, so everyone forgets what happened. So everyone is too busy with a war. And this is how they operate. They've operated this like this all in the past. And here we are today, where everything is falling apart, coming down around them. A lot of evidence is coming out, and it looks like they're preparing for something big. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.